to Kevin. In 1 minute, who is Kevin?
Who's Kevin?
Who is Kevin?
I'm a first generation rancher. Do you want to translate afterwards, or are you gonna have it?
Yeah.
Go through? Okay.
Captain.
So first generation rancher. I was born here in Southern California. My parents were both firefighters, and I was a baseball player. So I grew up playing sports and eating healthy. I went to college for a baseball scholarship, and I got really into eating grass-fed, grass-finished meat and eating healthy and fueling my body with the best nutrition. And then when my baseball career ended, I got injured. I got into regenerative agriculture, first permaculture and kind of landscaping, and then more so ranching. I've ranched with Roger Savory, Alan Savory's son, and that was my first go at ranching in 2016. And then in 2020, I bought a local cattle company with 290 cow-calf pairs and 16,000 acres of managed leases. So I went from somebody with no background in ranching, first generation. I graduated college in 2011, and then by 2021, so 10 years later, I was managing 16,000 acres and close to 500 cattle. So.
Oh, that's nice. It's very different business than most of them of Spain. But okay, where are you exactly? How is the weather here? How many inches of raining?
Mm-hmm.
How long is the green season?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we're here in Southern California, but it's San Diego County, so close to the city of San Diego. We have 3 leases. One's in Fallbrook, another one more like in the mountains. The Fallbrook's a coastal lease. And then we just got done driving to one of our irrigated leases. So rainfall average is around like 16 inches, and very Mediterranean climate. So winter rainfall, mostly a C3 grass environment, mostly annuals, but
yeah.
Obviously we're trying to bring those perennials back,
Mm-hmm.
And that's the name of our company, our meat company too, is Perennial Pastures. That's what we're trying to encourage back in the landscape. So so does that answer your question about the climate?
Yeah.
So our rainy season is like from December through like April, really. And the green season, we really only have like 3 or 4 months of green, but I'm trying to get it back to sort of pre-Spanish contact. When the indigenous were managing this landscape, they would have both C3 and C4 grasses year-round in the landscape, perennials. So I think California has the potential to be year-round green, and that's what we're aiming for with our management systems.
Yeah. What are the source of income for your business, and in which percent each one?
Source of income?
Yeah.
So we sell a lot of meat online. So our business, Perennial Pastures, has a Shopify site online, and we sell a lot of bulk beef, so whole and half and quarter cows and 1/8. And I would say like 70-80% of our business is online now. And we do the rest of it through farmers markets and a little bit of restaurants. So I would say like 20% of that is farmers markets, and then maybe like 2-3% is restaurants and wholesale.
How do you say that is your customer, your principal customer?
Yeah, mostly like moms, who are trying to buy good food for their kids and families. And then also like guys like yourself, who are trying to get buff, and lift a lot of weights and eat the carnivore diet, So
the new carnivore humans.
That's right. Yeah.
Great. Do you consider direct sales an option or an obligation?
Do I consider what?
And do you consider direct sales an options or an obligation for ranchers?
It's a good question. I think it's definitely not easy to pull off. There's a lot to know in direct to consumer sales. I definitely think for most ranchers, they can figure it out, and it certainly can help with your margins, especially on small operations like probably most of Spain. You know, I think for most of Spain, it's probably necessary to go direct to consumer so you can capture all of that value creation. But if you have a big enough enterprise and you can run it at scale, then you can be more of like a low-cost producer and run lots of turnover for very, very low labor units, and you can be profitable and create wealth through just selling commodities, you know, calves. But I think you need a lot of scale to make that happen. So, which we have here in the West and in the U.S., but I know is not very common in Spain, where potentially the land bases are a lot smaller.
It's true. Okay. You say that you start with knowledge and conocement from the permaculture. When you start managing your own cattle, you start moving the animals, doing rotational grazing, or
yeah, that's how we started. And you know, Jaime Elizondo is one of my big mentors, and Johann Zietzman and Graham Hand, and I come a lot from that ultra high density lineage. You know, Johann was the first one after Alan Savory kind of came up with a lot of the initial concepts and trials around rotational grazing in cells. Johann was the first one to do it more multiple moves per day and more in laneways, you know, laneway grazing.
Yeah.
And so, you know, Jaime and Johann had the sustainable ranching courses, and I watched those, and then later worked with Roger Savory, Alan Savory's son, who'd done ultra high density grazing, and then Graham Hand, who learned from Alan too, back in the early days when Alan used to live in New Mexico, and now does a lot of work with producers in Australia around high density grazing, high utilization, long recovery, you know, good genetics, you know, phenotypes that can perform well in those environments. So that's the lineage. It's hard to implement on 16,000 acres. You know, it requires a lot of capital, mostly water systems, you know.
Yes.
But right away we started with the right genetics, and we brought Moshona bulls in, 12 Moshona bulls that we brought from Jaime in Florida, from the Midnight Ranch. And that was our initial cross that we were putting on our 290 females. Those females were Angus Hereford crosses, so black Baldies. So that was a good first cross. So we started with the genetics right away. We tightened the calving season. We culled a lot of the old females, and then we started putting our water and fencing systems in to really start to tighten up the moves. But when we took over the lease that we had, it was just one big, you know, 8,000 acre pasture. So we started subdividing to 12, and then with high tensile, and then even within the high tensile, we started polywire subdivisions as well within that. So we kind of came up with a good mix of high tensile and polywire to really start to intensify the grazing and tighten up our densities and increase our utilizations, right? And the animals did great, you know, a lot of the early animals. And the ones that didn't, you know, nice thing about having a meat business when you're trying to build your genetics is you can turn the ones that don't quite perform into a sellable product, whereas in some cases, if you're just selling the commodity, you know, if you're selling the commodity, Johan talks about there's a way to supplement where that cow will still get pregnant, but you can still identify the bad ones through that process. But yeah, so that was kind of how we started in implementing the system.
I know. What's your vision about nature, owner of a ranch?
I see diverse perennial grasslands, both C3 and C4 grasses. And the beauty of, I guess, the time we live in now is we can create whatever we want, Our landscapes have been so altered by human beings.
100%.
Yeah, that we can do whatever we want. So I love the Dehesa ecosystem, from Spain. I've been there. And my first farm was actually called Montado Farms, after the Portuguese version of the Dehesa, so I'm very familiar with that system, and I would love to see some sort of perennial grass-based anchored system, with oaks or other type of savanna tree species dotted in. Now, I've yet to find anybody on a ranching scale that's been profitable coming back right from the beginning planting trees. I think you kind of need to heal the soil and figure the grass out first and then replant. A lot of our old savannas are no longer, we used to have a lot of savannas, but yeah, so that would be my kind of ideal ecosystem, is 20-30 different grass species, both warm season and cool season. A lot of flowers, a lot of diversity, clear running water, full streams, full springs, good water infiltration, and then kind of a planned sort of tree and shrub layer that offered nice shade and wind breaks for the cattle or whatever livestock we decided to have there. So.
We have the same vision.
Yeah.
What about cattle? Is a profitable business?
I think it can be. You have to be realistic about scale and the right marketing, so there's that guy there in Spain, in Leon, I forget his name, but he's a chef. I think he only has 30 cattle, and he raises them, feeds them on grain for 10 years, and they get super tall, and then he kills them at that steakhouse in Leon, and makes 50,000 per animal or something like that. So that's one model, but I don't think it's very sustainable because he uses a lot of grain. But if you took that model and you applied regenerative concepts, I think you could sell animals still for a very high price, very nutrient dense with great flavor. Certainly, there's producers that are profitable. I think we've yet to find a good cadre or group of producers that have put the total package together, the total grazing, the high density grazing, the genetics, the meat business, the marketing, the value adding, the bone broth, the liver supplements, the tallow for your face. There's all sorts of things that you can do to maximize the carcass value, right? So that's what we're trying to do, is I think be one of the first ever to have a vertically integrated operation where you manage the cattle in a regenerative way, in a profitable way at scale, and then you use the latest marketing techniques to maximize the carcass value. So it's hard to pull off. We're still very much in the middle of that journey, but there's certainly folks the best model I know is the Coglins in Australia, and Anna and Michael Coglin. I think they run 5,000 head with 2 full-time equivalents. Yeah, they have 95 pastures. They move the cows once a week, and they move themselves, when they're done with an area, and it's very easy and super low cost of production, 50 cents per pound, live weight. So yeah, it's if anybody wants to read about them, there's a book by Jim Howell called For the Love of Land, and they're one of the case studies in that book. But they're one of the best I've seen. Certainly there's operations like Caretas in Mexico that has a pretty low cost of production. There's just not a lot of data out there, to be honest with you, on the profitability of ranches. That's why I've enrolled in the Executive Link program through Ranching for Profit. And so, you know, we're benchmarking ourselves against other ranches and part of a network that appreciates benchmarking. So I think there needs to be more conversation around that, because there's not a lot of people that are transparent with their numbers, and they say, yeah, this is profitable, or do this or do that, but they don't have the data to back it up, the hard financial data, you know, the income statement, the balance sheet, the cash flow statement. We need to be rigorous on every aspect of the business, the biological monitoring, the financial monitoring, and you know, the economics.
Yeah, 100% in all of you say. Yeah. Right now, what do you say that have been your most failures, your biggest failures?
Just being smart with capital allocation. I've raised money for this project, and making sure that you spend it on things that can create cash for you in 1 to 3 months, as opposed to things that can create cash for you in 2 to 3 years. So capital allocation is very important when you bring money in, whether it's debt or equity, right? You want to be able to take that money in and multiply it very quickly. So lessons around that certainly are very important, you know, to take into consideration.
What skills does a livestock farmer need in 2025 to achieve his own success?
Observation, you know, the soil surface, the animals. Need a good plan. Need to know how to develop a property cheaply. And need to understand your finances and your cash flow and your cash flow statement and the demands of cash in the business and how to grow it. There's a lot that you need to know to be successful. It's not easy. And by no means have we achieved success. We have some traction. And hopefully this year we'll be profitable ourselves. But yeah, just a lot of business savvy, a lot of experience. And if you're new, like, you know, go work for somebody else, or be okay that you're not going to know everything. Be okay with losing a little bit of money, because it takes some of that to really get to the other side of how to actually create value for the customer, how to turn that into cash flow.
You think maybe that financial investments and organization is one of the most important things to have control?
Yeah,
maybe
sure.
The first.
Yeah, I think it's important to really understand your numbers. Yeah, how they work together. Yeah, that's, you know, you need to have a good financial plan. It's going to be wrong, but then you can adjust your assumptions and keep tweaking.
Many people think that if you do permaculture or regenerative farming, you are not thinking about money, but I think money is a result of doing good practice.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important. I saw many farmers that employ and practice the regenerative farming skills, and they don't have success.
Yeah.
And I think maybe this is one of the biggest reasons for that. What do you think about that? Yeah.
We need more financially minded producers and operators, for sure. There's so much focus on the soil side, the ecosystem side. We can't be regenerative unless we're profitable, you know, so it's got to start with that first. You need a profitable plan. sometimes it's hard to do it, especially with cattle, you know, when you don't have enough land. So then maybe you have to look at other enterprises, like perhaps dairy, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think dairy is actually one of the better enterprises. Small scale dairy, at least here in the States, I know. There's good examples in Australia and other areas where folks have very small herds, but they make a lot of money. The gross margins are really high, you know. We can sell a gallon of raw milk here for like $22 a gallon, and I know producers that are producing it for like $1.50 a gallon, so it's like 90-95% gross margins, and you can run 10 dairy cows and be pretty profitable, you know. So the cash flow on a dairy is pretty much unbeatable because you get a product every single day to sell, as opposed to every 2 years with beef, you know. So you have to really look at enterprise design, if it makes sense. I think a lot of people get locked into their land or where they're at, and they're kind of constrained by their land, and I think they have to break out of that paradigm, and maybe you need to sell your land to go have a successful enterprise somewhere else, you know. So I know that's hard for a lot of people, especially in Europe, if you've been if you're on a legacy property, or, you know, your family's owned it for so long, but in some cases it's just not big enough to be able to truly create wealth for a family, you know.
Yeah. And last question, Kevin. How about the mindset and the relations with God in a successful person?
Yeah, I think the farther that you go in business, the more that you realize things are kind of out of your control, you know. So I felt originally called to this work myself, like a deep calling from God and from my heart to go into this work. I always thought I was going to be a baseball player, and God wasn't calling me to do that. He was calling me to be a regenerative rancher. So one, we need to be open and listen for that calling, and when we get it, devote ourselves to that, and then know it's going to be a difficult road, but it's so worth it. And if you keep praying and you keep believing in yourself and know that God is with you, then at some point you'll be successful, you know. I have a few tattoos, you know. One of my tattoos is Psalm 23, right? And when I got it, I wasn't really into agriculture. I got it when I was 18 in college, but the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. And I think that's really interesting, because you have to let go and be led, be shepherded, you know, in the direction that we need to go. But it's kind of a regenerative prayer, because he's talking about green pastures, you know, and slow waters. The way I think about slow waters is I think about like good water infiltration, you know?
Yeah.
If you have good water infiltration.
I understand you, but people, I don't know.
yeah, you're gonna have to do some extra translation.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, so anyways, it's important, you know. We have to pray, and everything that happens to us that's good is from God. So be thankful, be humble, work hard, pray a lot, and good things will happen.
Okay, man, thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it. Thanks for coming all the way from Spain and hanging out for a bit.
Yeah.
Next one's from Spain with some jamón ibérico and some good cheese and wine.
Ok, gente, esto ha sido todo, la entrevista con Kevin. Espero que saquéis conclusiones, que anotéis en papel y boli algunas de las cosas, y que sobre todo lo apliquéis y paséis a la acción, que es lo más importante de todo, junto con una buena intención. Como bien veis, de nada me serviría entrevistar a una persona que viese que tiene un éxito externo pero no interno. En el tiempo que he estado con él he podido sentirlo. Es una persona que vive en completa paz, disfrute. Su equipo de trabajo es brutal, es increíble, y os recomiendo mucho que los empecéis a seguir ahora en redes, en PERENNIAL PASTURES, y sepáis más acerca de ellos. Y cuando vaya a España, pues si estáis interesados en que hagamos algún curso o alguna formación, pues por supuesto escribírnoslo, y ya sabéis que siempre tratamos de acercar el máximo conocimiento y valor posible a todos vosotros para que la ganadería cambie y todos mejoremos. Un abrazo y un saludo, nos vemos pronto. Chao, chao.